Imagine this. You wake up one morning, and for the first time, everything feels different. The air is heavier, the light sharper, and the silence louder. You look in the mirror, but the face staring back at you feels unfamiliar, like a stranger wearing your skin. You try to shake it off to go about your day as usual, but something gnaws at you, a quiet, insistent voice that whispers, "Who are you really?" You brush it aside. You've brushed it aside for years. You tell yourself it's just a bad day, a fleeting mood, a trick of the mind. But deep down, you know it's more than that. It's the weight of a question you've been running from your entire life. What if the life you've built, the career, the relationships, the identity you've carefully constructed isn't really yours? What if it's just a mask, a performance, a desperate attempt to fit into a world that demands you be anything but yourself? This is the paradox of modern existence. We spend our lives running from ourselves, yet we can never truly escape. We chase success, validation, and distraction, hoping to outrun the void within. But the void is always there, waiting, watching, growing louder with every step we take away from it. Why do we do this? Why do we spend so much energy avoiding the one thing we can never escape? Ourselves? Think about it. From the moment we're born, we're taught to conform. We're told what to believe, how to act, who to be. We're rewarded for fitting in and punished for standing out. We learn to hide our flaws, suppress our desires, and silence our doubts. We become experts at wearing masks, at playing roles, at pretending we're someone we're not. But beneath the surface, beneath the layers of conditioning and compromise, there's something real, something raw, something true. It's the part of you that feels alive when you're alone in nature, when you're lost in a creative flow, when you're laughing so hard your stomach hurts. It's the part of you that knows, deep down, that this isn't all there is. And yet we run from it. We run because it's terrifying. Because to face ourselves is to face everything we've been avoiding. Our fears, our failures, our deepest desires. It's to confront the possibility that we've been living a lie, that we've been chasing the wrong dreams, that we've been betraying the very essence of who we are. But here's the thing, the more we run, the more we suffer. The more we distract ourselves, the emptier we feel. The more we try to be someone we're not, the more we lose ourselves. So, what happens when you stop running? What happens when you turn around and face the void? What happens when you finally ask yourself, asterisk, who am I really? This is the question that haunts us all, whether we admit it or not. It's the question that drives our choices, our relationships, our lives. And until we answer it, we'll always feel like something is missing. But answering it isn't easy. It requires courage. It requires honesty. It requires a willingness to let go of everything you thought you knew about yourself. So, are you ready to stop running? Are you ready to face the truth of who you are? Because the day you stop running from yourself is the day your life truly begins. The problem is not that we don't know who we are. The problem is that we're afraid to find out. This fear is not irrational. It's rooted in the very fabric of our psychology and the structure of our society. To understand why we run from ourselves, we must first understand the forces that drive us to do so, forces that are as ancient as human consciousness itself. Let's start with the psyche. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist, spoke of the shadow, the part of ourselves we repress, deny, or hide because it feels too dark, too shameful, too unacceptable. The shadow is not inherently evil. It's simply the parts of us that don't align with the image we want to project to the world. It's our anger, our jealousy, our selfishness, our vulnerability. It's the parts of us we've been taught to reject. But here's the catch. The shadow doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. It grows stronger, festering in the unconscious, influencing our behavior in ways we don't even realize. It's the reason we lash out at loved ones, sabotage our own success, or feel inexplicably drawn to people and situations that hurt us. As Jung famously said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And yet, we resist facing our shadow. Why? Because it's painful. Because it forces us to confront the parts of ourselves we'd rather not see. because it threatens the carefully constructed identity we've spent years building. But the shadow is only one layer of the problem. Beneath it lies something even deeper, the existential void. Philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Friedrich Nietzsche have written extensively about the human struggle with meaning. Sartre argued that we are condemned to be free, that we have no choice but to create our own meaning in a universe that offers none. Nietzsche, on the other hand, warned of the death of God, not just the literal deity, but the collapse of all traditional sources of meaning and morality. In the absence of these external anchors, we are left with a terrifying freedom. We must decide who we are and what we stand for. But this freedom is also a burden. It's easier to outsource our identity to society, to let others tell us who we should be, than to face the abyss of our own potential. And so we run. We run into the arms of consumerism, social media, and endless distraction. We run into the safety of conformity, of doing what's expected of us, of living lives that look good on paper but feel hollow inside. We run because it's easier than confronting the truth, that we are alone in the universe, that we must create our own meaning, and that we are responsible for our own lives. But the running doesn't stop there. It's reinforced by societal forces that profit from our disconnection. Aldous Huxley, in his dystopian novel Brave New World, envisioned a society where people are kept docile and content through endless entertainment and superficial pleasures. Sound familiar? Modern society thrives on our inability to sit with ourselves. It sells us distractions, quick fixes, and false promises of happiness. It tells us that we're not enough, not smart enough, not attractive enough, not successful enough, and then offers us solutions in the form of products, ideologies, and lifestyles. It keeps us perpetually busy, perpetually striving, perpetually running. And yet, despite all this, the void remains. The more we try to fill it with external things, the deeper it grows. The more we distract ourselves, the louder it becomes. This is the hidden problem. We are trapped in a cycle of avoidance, driven by fear and reinforced by society. We run from ourselves because we're afraid of what we'll find, and we're afraid of what we'll lose if we stop running. But what if the thing we're running from is the very thing we need to find? What if the void isn't something to be feared, but something to be embraced? To answer these questions, we must first understand the consequences of our avoidance. Consequences that are far more insidious than we realize. The consequences of running from ourselves are not always obvious. They don't announce themselves with dramatic fanfare or catastrophic events. Instead, they seep into our lives slowly, subtly, like a poison that accumulates over time. One of the most immediate consequences is emotional numbness. When we refuse to face our shadow, our fears, and our desires, we shut down parts of ourselves. We become disconnected from our emotions, living in a state of detachment that feels safe but is ultimately lifeless. This is why so many people describe feeling empty or numb, even when their lives appear to be going well. But the numbness is just the beginning. Beneath it lies a deeper, more insidious consequence: self-betrayal. Every time we ignore our intuition, suppress our true feelings, or conform to societal expectations, we betray ourselves. We sacrifice our authenticity for the sake of approval, security, or comfort. And each betrayal chips away at our sense of self, leaving us feeling fragmented and lost. This fragmentation is not just psychological, it's neurological. Research in neuroscience has shown that the brain thrives on coherence. When our thoughts, emotions, and actions are aligned, we experience a sense of wholeness and well-being. But when they're not, we experience cognitive dissonance, a state of mental and emotional conflict that can lead to anxiety, depression, and even physical illness. And then there's the impact on our relationships. When we're disconnected from ourselves, we're unable to form genuine connections with others. We project our unmet needs, unresolved wounds, and unacknowledged fears onto the people around us, creating patterns of dysfunction and codependency. We attract partners who mirror our own disconnection, perpetuating cycles of pain and misunderstanding. But perhaps the most devastating consequence of all is the loss of meaning. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote extensively about the human need. Rebellion begins with a single radical act, the decision to stop running. This decision is not easy. It requires a fundamental shift in perspective, a willingness to question everything you've been taught, everything you've believed, everything you built. It requires you to confront the fear that has kept you trapped and to embrace the uncertainty that comes with true freedom. But how do you do this? How do you break free from the cycle of avoidance and step into the void? The first step is awareness. You must become aware of the ways in which you've been running from yourself. This means paying attention to your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors. It means noticing when you're distracting yourself, when you're numbing yourself, when you're betraying yourself. Awareness is not about judgment or self-criticism. It's about observation. It's about shining a light on the parts of yourself you've been avoiding, not to punish yourself, but to understand yourself. The second step is acceptance. You must accept the reality of who you are, your strengths, your weaknesses, your fears, your desires. This means letting go of the need to be perfect, to be liked, to be accepted. It means embracing your shadow, not as something to be ashamed of, but as something to be integrated. Acceptance is not about resignation. It's about liberation. It's about freeing yourself from the prison of self-denial and stepping into the truth of who you are. The third step is action. You must take concrete steps to align your life with your true self. This means making choices that reflect your values, your passions, and your purpose. It means setting boundaries, saying no to what doesn't serve you, and saying yes to what does. Action is not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about moving forward, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's scary, even when it's uncertain. But rebellion is not just an individual act. It's also a collective one. To truly break free, we must challenge the societal forces that keep us trapped. This means questioning the narratives we've been fed about success, about happiness, about identity. It means rejecting the distractions and the false promises and the empty ideals. It means creating a new way of being, one that prioritizes authenticity over conformity, connection over consumption, meaning over materialism. History is full of examples of individuals who have done this, who have rebelled against the status quo and stepped into their truth. Think of Carl Jung, who dared to explore the depths of the unconscious at a time when psychology was dominated by behaviorism. Think of Friedrich Nietzsche, who challenged the moral and religious foundations of his society and called for the creation of new values. Think of Viktor Frankl, who found meaning in the midst of unimaginable suffering and inspired millions to do the same. These individuals were not perfect. They were not free from fear or doubt or struggle. But they had the courage to face themselves, to confront the void, and to create something new. And so can you. But rebellion is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process. It's a daily commitment to yourself, to your truth, to your freedom. It's a journey, one that will challenge you, transform you, and ultimately set you free. But the journey is not without its risks. When you stop running, you will face resistance from within and from without. You will face fear, doubt, and uncertainty. You will face the temptation to go back, to retreat, to run. But you must keep going. You must keep moving forward. Because on the other side of the void is something extraordinary, the truth of who you are. And this truth is not something to be feared. It's something to be embraced. The ultimate truth is this: you are not running from yourself. You are running from the illusion of yourself. The person you've been trying to escape, the one you're afraid to face, the one you've been hiding from the world, is not the real you. It's a construct, a mask, a story you've been telling yourself for years. It's the product of conditioning, fear, and self-betrayal. The real you is something far greater, far deeper, far more powerful. It's the part of you that exists beyond the noise, beyond the fear, beyond the void. It's the part of you that knows, deep down, that you are enough just as you are. This realization is not just a psychological insight. It's a spiritual one. It's the recognition that your true self is not something to be found, but something to be remembered. It's the understanding that you are not separate from the universe, but a part of it, a unique expression of its infinite potential. This is the paradox of self-discovery. The more you seek yourself, the more you realize there's nothing to seek. The more you confront the void, the more you realize it's not empty. The more you embrace your shadow, the more you realize it's not dark. The void is not a threat, it's a mirror. It reflects back to you the truth of who you are, not the fragmented, fearful, conditioned self, but the whole, authentic, limitless self. This is the ultimate freedom, the freedom to be yourself. But this freedom is not something you can achieve. It's something you must embody. It's something you must live. And living it requires a radical shift in perspective. It requires you to see yourself not as a problem to be solved, but as a mystery to be explored. It requires you to embrace the uncertainty, the discomfort, the imperfection of being human. It requires you to stop running, not just from yourself, but from life itself. Because life is not something to be escaped. It's something to be lived. It's something to be experienced, to be felt, to be embraced in all its beauty, its pain, its complexity. And when you stop running, when you turn around and face the void, you realize something extraordinary. The void is not outside of you. It's within you. It's the space where your true self resides. This is the final, most powerful realization. The day you stop running from yourself is the day you come home. And coming home is not the end of the journey. It's the beginning. Because when you come home to yourself, you realize that you are not alone. You realize that you are connected to yourself, to others, to the universe. You realize that you are part of something greater, something infinite, something eternal. And this realization changes everything. It changes how you see yourself. It changes how you see others. It changes how you see the world. It changes how you live. Because when you stop running, you start living. You start creating. You start loving. You start being. And being is the most radical act of all. The day you stop running from yourself is the day your life truly begins. It's the day you step into the truth of who you are, not the fragmented, fearful, conditioned self, but the whole, authentic, limitless self. It's the day you embrace the void, not as something to be feared, but as something to be explored. It's the day you come home, to yourself, to life, to the universe. And when you come home, you realize something extraordinary. You were never lost. You were always here. You were always yourself. And that is the most powerful realization of all.